Imagine waking up, tomorrow morning and you walk into your bathroom, turn on the light, and look in the mirror.
Right, just a totally normal morning routine.
Exactly. But then you realize your reflection has completely changed. I mean, totally altered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you suddenly have these heavy, curling horns just protruding right from your forehead.
Like out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. And you have a thick, spade-tipped tail. Your eyes are, they're completely solid without any whites at all.
That is basically a horror movie.
It really is. But the terrifying part isn't just that this happened to you. It's that, you look outside and it has happened to your parents, your kids, and like millions of complete strangers across the globe simultaneously.
A spontaneous global mutation.
Yeah, your entire genetic lineage, past, present, future, has been physically branded. And why? Because over a century ago, 13 people you never even met signed a piece of paper.
I mean, it is basically the ultimate violation of bodily autonomy, right? Enacted on a planetary scale. We're talking about an event that didn't just alter political borders or, shift who was in charge. It literally overwrote the fundamental biology of an entire demographic.
And that is exactly what we are tearing into today. You, the listener, provided us with this massive, dense stack of sources.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge stack.
Yeah, we're looking at historical excerpts from the Brimstone Angels records, along with some incredibly complex Forgotten Realms lore documents. And our entire mission today, the focus of this deep dive, is unpacking a shadowy coven of warlocks known as the Toril 13.
Who are, depending on which historical text you actually believe, either the greatest martyrs in the history of the world, Coral, or
the worst.
Right, or the most selfish, short-sighted villains to ever, manipulate the metaphysical fabric of reality.
Well, okay, let's unpack this. And don't worry, we are going to strip away all the dense high fantasy jargon today.
Yeah, you really don't need a degree in planar metaphysics to follow this story.
Definitely not. Because, beneath all the spells and the demons, this is just a very human story about the psychology of survival.
Absolutely.
It's about what happens when marginalized people are pushed to the absolute brink, right? The terrifying compromises they end up making, and how those compromises mutate over a century into an inescapable curse.
So, to understand the sheer scale of what the Toril 13 actually did, we have to establish what the world looked like before they intervened.
Right, setting the stage.
Yeah, because the tieflings of today, meaning the late 1400s Della reckoning, which is the calendar system our sources are anchored in, they look pretty uniform.
Right.
They all bear that distinct infernal aesthetic you described in the mirror analogy. But before the Toril 13 struck their bargain, the word tiefling meant something entirely different.
Yeah, the sources make a huge point of this. Tiefling wasn't like a biological race in the way elves or dwarves are,
Exactly.
It was essentially just this colloquial catch-all term for any mortal being who happened to have fiendish ancestry somewhere in their family tree.
Precisely. And that fiendish ancestry was incredibly diverse, which meant, the physical manifestation of that blood was completely unpredictable.
Like a genetic lottery.
Literally.
Yeah.
You had tieflings descended from demons, which are creatures of the abyss, just beings of pure destructive chaos.
Wow.
And then you had others descended from Rakshasas, those manipulative, tiger-headed fiends. Some carried the blood of night hags, who deal in nightmares and soul trading, or Yugoloths, who are basically cosmic mercenaries.
So their physical appearances were just a total mixed bag. I mean, the documents mention that some looked completely human, except for one bizarre trait, right? Like having reversed hands.
Yeah, or casting a shadow that just didn't match their silhouette.
Oh, that is so creepy. Or they had cloven hooves or scales, or maybe they just smelled faintly of sulfur all the time.
But here's the thing, that immense diversity, that was actually their greatest vulnerability.
Oh, how so?
Well, because they didn't share a unified culture or a unified appearance or even a unified pantheon of gods to protect them, they were incredibly fractured.
Ah, I see.
And, in mortal society, anything that is visibly different and lacks institutional protection just becomes marginalized. They were universally distrusted, forced to the absolute fringes of society, basically living as outcasts or criminals just to survive.
Which makes them the perfect target.
Exactly.
Enter Asmodeus. He is the king of the nine hells. Now, I do need to pause here for a second because the terminology gets incredibly specific in this lore.
Right, it really does.
At this point in history, Asmodeus is an archdevil. He is incredibly old, incredibly powerful, but he is not a god. And I'm kind of struggling with the logic here, honestly. What is the actual mechanical difference between being the supreme ruler of hell and being an actual god?
Right, it's a great question. It really comes down to the fundamental physics of divinity in this universe. An archdevil, even the king of hell, possesses immense innate power. But, and this is key, that power is finite, and it's geographically bound to their specific domain.
Okay, so he's stuck in hell, basically.
Basically, yeah. Gods, on the other hand, operate on an entirely different metaphysical economy. Gods draw their power directly from worship.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a dedicated base of mortal followers essentially acts as a continuous, limitless power grid that feeds a deity.
Yeah.
It grants them the ability to hear prayers, grant spells to clerics, and influence reality across multiple planes of existence.
Oh, wow. So Asmodeus wants to plug into that grid.
He desperately wants to plug in. He wants to cross the threshold from being just a cosmic warlord to an actual undeniable deity.
And he looks at this scattered, isolated population of tieflings, these millions of mortals carrying little sparks of fiendish magic in their veins. And he doesn't see people.
No, not at all.
He sees an untapped resource.
Exactly. He sees the perfect foundation for a captive audience of worshippers. His goal is just terrifying in its simplicity. He intends to forcefully consolidate them.
Right.
He wants to enslave every single tiefling on Toril. It doesn't matter if your ancestor was a chaotic demon or a neutral hag. He wants to bring them all under his absolute control to fuel his ascension.
Wow. So it's an extinction-level threat to their freedom. They are literally staring down the barrel of eternal generational slavery.
That's exactly what it is.
And this is the crucible that forces the Toril 13 into existence. But this is where the historical record just completely fractures. We have two primary sources in the stack today that offer wildly contradictory accounts of how these warlocks responded to this threat.
Yeah, historiography dealing with cosmic entities is always a minefield. When the stakes involve the reshaping of reality, the truth is usually the first casualty.
Totally. So the first text is this ancient, obscure book discovered by one of our main subjects, Farida. It's called the Book of Tarkamis. And this book, it frames the Toril 13 as these tragic, noble martyrs.
Right. According to this specific narrative, 13 tiefling warlocks realized the inevitability of Asmodeus' plan. They knew they couldn't fight the King of Hell in a direct conflict, right? That would be suicide.
So what did they do?
So they approached him as negotiators. They offered to serve as the magical conduits, the anchors necessary to facilitate his ascension to godhood. They would provide the raw, arcane infrastructure he needed.
But the condition of their service was this cosmic compromise. They demanded that Asmodeus spare the wider tiefling race from outright enslavement. I mean, the book literally uses the phrase, sometimes the only right choice is a sacrifice.
Very dramatic.
Right. It implies these 13 individuals willingly damned their own souls for eternity so that the rest of their people could retain their free will.
It paints a picture of ultimate altruism. They supposedly took the yoke of the nine hells onto their own shoulders to buy their cousins, their children, and their neighbors the right to self-determination.
Okay, but then we flip over to the second account, and this one comes from a much closer source, Lorcan. He is a Cambion, like a half-devil, who actually lives in the nine hells and brokers warlock pacts for a living. And Lorcan's perspective is brutally cynical. He focuses on the leader of the 13, a woman named Griseis Kakistos, and, well, he basically calls her a madwoman.
He really does. Lorcan strips away all of that romantic martyrdom. He tells Farida, in absolutely no uncertain terms, that Briseis sold out her entire race for personal gain.
Wow.
Yeah, that there was no grand negotiation for freedom. It was a hostile takeover, and she was cashing out.
He implies she violently coerced the other members of the coven into participating, and that she is entirely to blame for the biological curse that falls upon the tieflings later.
Exactly.
It kind of makes me think about the last time a major corporation in our world went through a massive merger.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right, like the CEO who orchestrates the deal and signs the papers is usually hailed as this visionary genius by the shareholders who make millions. But if you walk down to the factory floor, to the employees whose pensions were dissolved to fund the buyout...
Yeah, they're not sharing.
No, that exact same CEO is remembered as a ruthless parasite. Which one is true here? We are looking at the same event through two totally different socioeconomic lenses.
What's fascinating here is we have to ask ourselves, is the Book of Tarkamis simply a coping mechanism?
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, think about it. When a demographic experiences a trauma on a planetary scale, when they're forcefully marked and altered by the Lord of Hell, it is psychologically devastating to believe it happened simply because one woman was greedy.
Oh, man. That is so bleak.
Right. So creating a myth of noble sacrifice gives meaning to the trauma. It allows the victims to tell themselves, we carry this mark because someone loved us enough to save us from something worse.
Wow. So the historical text might literally just be a societal trauma response seeded over decades just so people could sleep at night.
It's very possible.
But, if we want to figure out which version is closer to the truth, we can't just look at the fallout. We have to examine the architect of the deal. We have to look at Bryce's Kakistos.
And the deeper we dig into her origins, the more Lorcan's cynical narrative actually begins to align with the facts. Let's start with the name she chose for herself, Kakistos.
All right, the sources note this is derived from ancient Greek roots. It isn't just a generic fantasy surname someone pulled out of a hat.
No, not at all.
It literally translates to the absolute superlative of bad or evil. It means the worst. You don't adopt a moniker that means the worst if you're planning a selfless act of charity.
Exactly. But she wasn't born with that name. She was born Bisera in the year 1331 of the Dale Reckoning calendar, and her origins could not be further removed from the cosmic power she eventually wielded.
Where did she start out?
She and her twin sister Eliona were born in a place called Darmstadt. It's a brutally unforgiving, freezing village in the northern region of Vasa.
The text gives us this incredibly visceral, jarring scene of her childhood. Bisera is like 8 years old. It's freezing cold. And she is hiding behind a temple of Selûne, the moon goddess, just waiting for adventurers to die in the snow.
Yeah, it's grim. While her twin sister cowers in the bushes, terrified, 8-year-old Bisera is methodically stripping the corpses.
Oh my gosh.
She's digging through frozen pockets for copper pieces, prying daggers from stiff fingers, stealing minor magical trinkets.
That level of poverty, it rewires a child's brain. When your daily survival depends on taking what you can from the dead because the living ignore you, the concept of morality becomes a luxury you literally cannot afford.
Exactly.
It breeds this relentless burning need for control. Like if you have power, you don't have to freeze in the mud anymore.
And that is exactly the psychological vacuum that fiendish entities prey upon. So when she is 17 years old, in 1348 DR, she is introduced to the occult underground by an older warlock named Titus. And she makes her first pact.
Okay, who does she make it with?
She binds herself to a succubus named Metanoma.
Let's break down the mechanics of that, actually. How does a pact with a succubus actually function? What is she trading away, and what is she getting in return?
Well, a warlock pact is essentially a metaphysical transaction. The mortal offers a fragment of their soul, their vitality, or maybe their absolute obedience.
Oh.
In exchange, the patron, in this case Metanoma, grants them access to arcane knowledge and raw magical energy.
Okay.
Now, succubi specialize in manipulation, enchantment, and the exploitation of desire. For a young woman who grew up powerless and invisible, the ability to bend the minds of others, to command attention and resources through magic, that is intoxicating.
And she never looks back, does she? She completely sheds the identity of the shivering orphan Bisera and rebirths herself as Bryce's Kakistos.
Yeah, the transformation is complete.
And here's where it gets really interesting. She begins to build a terrifying brand. She becomes known across the Northern Realms as the Brimstone Angel.
Such a great title.
Lorcan tells us that tiefling parents in Vasa would use her name as a literal boogeyman. They'd tell their children, be quiet and go to sleep, or the Brimstone Angel will come and peel the skin right off your bones.
She essentially weaponized fear to ensure she would never, ever be vulnerable again. But the visual contrast is what's really striking here.
Right.
The sources describe her not as some hideous monster, but as implacably, terrifyingly beautiful. She retained a perfectly human face, but she manifested sharp, sweeping horns like a mountain goat, and her legs ended in cloven hooves.
She is just the aesthetic embodiment of an alluring trap. And as she rises in power, as she begins to coordinate this massive continent-spanning plot to help Asmodeus, we finally get the smoking gun regarding her true motives.
Yes, we do.
And it completely shatters the whole martyr narrative.
Decades later, when her ghost is confronted, she finally admits the truth. She didn't orchestrate the Toril 13 to save the tiefling race from slavery. She did it because Asmodeus offered her a seat at the table.
He promised her that if she delivered the magical infrastructure for his ascension, she would be elevated alongside him. He promised her powers unlike any mortal had ever held. She would literally sit at the right hand of the new god of evil.
The hubris is almost unfathomable. I mean, the urchin who used to steal copper from frozen corpses looked at the Lord of the Ninth, the oldest and most cunning manipulator in the cosmos, and thought, I am smart enough to be his peer. I can negotiate with the devil and win.
She was willing to put the genetic destiny of millions of innocent people on the roulette wheel just to buy her way into the divine pantheon. But here is where the mechanics of her plan run into a massive bottleneck, right?
Exactly.
Because you cannot funnel the amount of magical energy required to elevate an archdevil into a god through a single mortal body. It would just instantly incinerate her.
Yeah, the physical and metaphysical load is way too great. She needed a distributed network. She needed 12 other uniquely powerful tieflings to share the burden, basically acting as living pylons to ground the magic of the ritual.
But finding 12 people willing to tear the universe apart isn't easy. Who were these people? I mean, did she just post an ad on a tavern bounty board?
Not quite. She spent years scouring the continent, identifying specific, highly potent, fiendish bloodlines. The roster of the Toril 13 actually represents a really wide spectrum of the tiefling experience.
Like who?
Well, you have figures like Frenike, who was an incredibly brilliant wizard. Her mastery of the arcane was so absolute, she eventually achieved lichdom, turning herself into an immortal, undead entity.
Wow. Then you have Case as the Vice Lord. The text says he was Bryce's right-hand man. He was a descendant of demons who visually passed as a normal human, and he seemed to be a fully willing participant, completely bought into Bryce's vision of ultimate power.
Right. There was also Titus Greybeard, the man who originally introduced Bryce's to warlock magic in the first place. Keldura, Illyria, Marguerites, Zeal, Harper, Nicodemus, Lorman Jarl. But as you suspected, this wasn't a democratic fellowship of willing volunteers.
Oh, not at all.
When the promises of power failed, Bryce's resorted to absolute brutality.
And the prime example of this is Toril. The text notes that Pradir was a tiefling from the distant eastern land of Durpar. And crucially, he was already a member of the Ashmedai.
Right, and for context, the Ashmedai are a secret society of cultists who actively worship Asmodeus.
Right, so logically you'd think a guy who's already in an Asmodeus cult would be absolutely thrilled to help his dark lord become a god. But even Pradir looks at this and realizes that what Bryces is proposing is fundamentally catastrophic.
He knows it's a bad idea.
Yeah, he refuses to join, so what does she do?
She uses blood magic and extensive blackmail to forcefully bend his mind. She strips away his autonomy and drags him into the coven completely against his will.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the hypocrisy here. The historians who wrote the Book of Tarquemis claim Briseis made this deal to save tieflings from having their free will stripped away by Asmodeus. Yet, in order to execute the deal, she literally uses mind control magic to strip the free will away from her own people. She is enslaving her coven to prevent her race from being enslaved. It's the ultimate destroy the village to save it mentality.
It perfectly illustrates how power corrupts the original intent, or, perhaps it reveals that the original intent was always entirely self-serving.
Yeah.
She viewed her fellow tieflings not as people to be saved, but as tools to be utilized.
Just a means to an end.
Exactly. And all of this preparation culminates in the year 1385 Dela Reckoning.
The year of blue fire. We cannot gloss over this because the timing is everything. 1385 DR is the year the spell plague hit the world of Toril. What exactly broke in the universe to make this the perfect time for an archdevil to make his move?
So magic in the Forgotten Realms isn't just an abstract concept. It is a tangible, woven fabric that permeates reality, and it's governed by the goddess of magic, Mystra. In 1385, Mystra is assassinated by another deity. Her death causes the weave to violently unravel. Unfiltered, raw magic, often manifesting as the destructive blue fire, sweeps across the globe. It mutilates landscapes, mutates creatures, and causes the very laws of physics to stutter and fail.
It's basically the equivalent of the world's nuclear power grid simultaneously melting down and irradiating the atmosphere while all the safety protocols are just turned off.
That is a perfect analogy.
The divine hierarchy is in absolute chaos. The gods are scrambling just to survive the metaphysical fallout. And Asmodeus realizes that while all the cosmic authorities are distracted by the burning of the weave, the security cameras are essentially turned off.
It is the perfect chaotic smokescreen. And in the midst of this global disaster, Bryces gathers the coven. The texts paint a harrowing picture of this ritual. It takes place at night, in a grove of trees that have been burned dead by the spell plague.
Right.
The 13 tieflings are arrayed in a massive circle, their diverse fiendish traits on full display: wings, varied horns, unnatural shadows.
They use the fractured, bleeding magic of the environment to violently drag a massive spire of solid bedrock out of the earth. And then they paint the symbol of Asmodeus onto this stone spire using the blood of sacrifices.
Bryce stands at the head of the formation, her robes just soaked in blood. The ritual is described as forcing the beat of 10,000 pulses into synchronization.
Wow.
They're using the raw engines of the nine hells, fueled by the tortured howls of damned souls, to literally bore a metaphysical tunnel through reality.
They turn themselves into a lightning rod. They create a conduit that allows Asmodeus to reach out of hell and consume a staggering amount of divine energy that was left floating in the vacuum of the spell plague. Specifically, the residual power of Azuth, the god of spells.
Yes, it's wild.
Asmodeus literally cannibalizes a wounded god's power to rewrite his own cosmic status. He ascends. He actually becomes a god.
But the physical laws of magic dictate that energy of that magnitude leaves a permanent scar on the conduit it travels through. The Toril 13 acted as the filter for this divine infernal ascension.
And there's a cost for that.
A huge cost. The consequence of channeling that much concentrated essence of Asmodeus didn't just affect the warlocks in the circle, it echoed backward and forward through the sympathetic magical connections of their blood.
This is the genetic rewrite. We established earlier that tieflings had vastly different appearances based on their specific, very demonic or hag ancestors.
Right.
The moment Asmodeus achieves godhood through this ritual, a shockwave of infernal law washes over the entire species.
The magic of the Pact Infernal forcibly overwrites their biology. It doesn't matter if your grandfather was a chaotic demon from the abyss. The magic scoured that heritage away at a cellular level. In an instant, every single tiefling on the planet became a true breeding scion of Asmodeus.
It's horrifying. Millions of people suddenly physically transformed, their varied traits vanished, replaced uniformly by the thick horns, the solid-colored eyes, the tails. They were branded.
Yeah.
Asmodeus couldn't enslave their minds, so he claimed ownership over their very flesh.
And the texts point out a chilling biological permanence to this curse, too. As Lorcan notes, mortals usually breed according to standard genetics. If a human and an elf have a child, the child is a half-elf.
Sure.
But the magic of the Toril 13 made the tiefling bloodline impossibly unnaturally dominant.
Right. If a tiefling has a child with a human or an elf or an orc, the child isn't a mix. The child is always a full-blooded tiefling bearing the exact same marks of Asmodeus. It is a biological contagion designed to ensure that Asmodeus's brand never dilutes over time.
But the immediate physical transformation of a species is really only half of the legacy.
Mm.
The Toril 13 didn't just alter biology, they inadvertently created an entirely new metaphysical commodity.
Which fast-forwards us nearly a century later into the late 1400s. We're looking at the era around 1478 Della Reckoning. The original 13 warlocks are mostly gone. They've died of old age or gone into hiding or, in Frinica's case, turned into an undead skeleton. But their descendants are walking around. And those descendants carry a uniquely concentrated echo of that original world-breaking magic.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, in the Nine Hells, a drop of that kind of power is worth more than gold.
Oh, absolutely.
The political ecosystem of Bader the Nine Hells is an eternal cutthroat corporate ladder. Devils are constantly jockeying for status, backstabbing each other to gain the favor of archdukes. In this hyper-competitive environment, holding the Warlock Pact of a descendant to the Toril 13 becomes an unparalleled flex of status.
It's not just a trophy, though, is it? I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this devilish economy. If a devil gets a descendant to sign a pact, how does that actually translate into political leverage?
Think of it like owning the mineral rights to a limitless metaphysical energy well. The souls of the Toril 13 were the wiring that handled a divine ascension. Their descendants inherited that enhanced wiring.
Okay, that makes sense.
When a devil holds the pact of one of these descendants, they aren't just getting a mortal servant. They are tapping into a residual frequency of Asmodeus' own ascension magic.
Right.
They can siphon that ambient power to enhance their own strength, which makes them incredibly dangerous to their rivals.
Okay, so owning one is great, but the sources reveal that the ultimate goal for these devils is to collect a full set. They want to hold the packs of one descendant from each of the 13 original bloodlines.
Yeah.
It's the most high-stakes, terrifying game of Monopoly imaginable. These devils are essentially playing high-stakes Pokemon with human souls. Gotta catch them all. But the prize is political leverage in hell, and the trading cards are living, breathing people who have no idea they're part of a cosmic collection.
It really is like that. And one of the most aggressive players in this market is Lorcan, the Cambion we discussed earlier. Now, just as a reminder, a Cambion is the offspring of a fiend and a mortal. In Lorcan's case, his mother is Invadia, a fallen Erinys, which is essentially a corrupted angel of hell.
Because he's only a half-devil, the pureblood devils look down on him. They basically treat him like garbage. So Lorcan has a massive chip on his shoulder. He is desperate to prove his worth, and his strategy is to assemble the complete set of the Toril 13.
And he is incredibly shrewd about it. Over the years, he manages to secure pacts with 12 of the 13 bloodlines. He tracks down heirs of Titus Greybeard, Zeal Harper, Illyria, and others like Lax the Yellow, Nasmos, Nalamrel.
Wow, he got almost all of them.
Yeah, but he is stalled. He cannot find the final piece of the puzzle.
He needs a descendant of the CEO. He needs an heir of Bryce's Kakistos, the Brimstone Angel.
And finding a Kakistos heir is nearly impossible. Warlocks who channel that much dark energy rarely prioritize domestic life. Most of the original 13 scattered their offspring to protect them or simply never had children. After a century of warfare, disease, and hiding, the Bryce's bloodline is considered functionally extinct. Lorcan is aware of only 3 major archdevils who have ever managed to locate one.
But Lorcan is obsessive. He manages to acquire this deeply specific magical artifact, a ring that turns freezing cold whenever it is in the physical proximity of Bryce's Kakistos' bloodline.
A very handy tracking device.
Very handy. And through a stroke of bizarre cosmic luck, this ring leads him to the specific subjects our listener asked about. The twins, Faraday and Havilar.
Faraday and Havilar represent a fascinating anomaly in this grim history. They are direct descendants of the Brimstone Angel, but they're entirely disconnected from the occult underworld. They were raised in a tiny, remote, rugged frontier village called Arush Vayam.
And the most beautiful, defiant detail in all of this lore is who raised them. They were found as abandoned infants and taken in by a dragonborn, a massive, honorable reptilian warrior named Clanless Mayhen.
Yeah, Mayhen is great.
Biologically, culturally, logically, a dragonborn has absolutely no connection to tieflings or devils. Mayhen looking at these cursed infants and deciding, these are my daughters and I will protect them, is just a massive middle finger to the biological destiny Asmodeus has tried to enforce.
It really is. Mayhen did everything in his power to keep them hidden. He recognized the danger their potent blood represented, even if he didn't fully understand the mechanics of the Toril 13. He tried to teach them to keep their heads down. But blood with that much metaphysical gravity acts like a beacon in the dark.
It's Havilar, the more impulsive of the two sisters, who accidentally pulls the pin on the grenade. She is practicing her glaive techniques, and she decides she wants a sparring partner. So she attempts to cast a very minor, rudimentary summoning ritual, just to pull a generic imp out of the ether to practice on.
But because her blood is effectively a superconductor for infernal magic, the minor ritual violently tears open a portal right next to Lorcan in the Nine Hells.
Lorcan steps through the portal, fully intending to murder whatever foolish mortal interrupted his day. But the moment he steps into Arush Vayam, his magical ring instantly turns to ice. He looks at these two teenage girls and realizes he has just won the cosmic lottery. He has found the rarest bloodline in the universe.
He recognizes the opportunity instantly. But he doesn't immediately force a pact on Havilar. He observes them. He sees that Faridi is fiercely protective of her sister, but also deeply frustrated by her own powerlessness. She is angry at the world for treating them like monsters.
Lorcan is a master manipulator. He zeroes in on Farida's vulnerability. He doesn't offer her evil, he offers her agency. He offers her the power to protect her family. And Farida, completely unaware of the century of geopolitical baggage attached to her DNA, agrees. She signs the pact.
By doing so, she inadvertently completes Lorcan's set of the Toril 13. She turns a minor, mocked Cambion into one of the most politically dangerous entities in the lower planes. And instantly, a massive target is painted on her back.
The moment the other devils realize Lorcan has the full set, it's open season. His own mother, Invadia, tries to kill him to steal the packs. His ruthless, full-blooded sister, Serche, begins plotting against him. Succubi, archdukes, other devils like Kulaga and Shatai, everyone wants a piece of Farida because her soul is the key to tapping the power of the Toril 13.
But while the devils are busy fighting over the descendants like poker chips, they are entirely blind to a much larger threat brewing in the background. Because the original architect of this entire disaster wasn't finished.
We're moving into the final phase of this incredible saga: regret, revenge, and the plot to unmake a god. While Lorcan is gloating over his completed collection, the ghost of Briseis Kakistos is watching, and she has realized a crushing, infuriating truth.
She was a pawn. Asmodeus is the god of evil, the lord of lies. The idea that he would ever share divine authority with a mortal urchin was laughable.
Totally.
He took the massive surge of power she provided in 1385, he claimed his godhood, he branded the tiefling race, and he tossed Briseis aside. She never got her seat at his right hand.
She died bitter, betrayed, and empty-handed. But death doesn't extinguish her ambition. Her ghost returns to the mortal plane, and her ego is so massive that she refuses to accept defeat. She decides that if Asmodeus won't share the godhood, she's going to take it away from him.
Her plan is staggering in its audacity and complexity. She intends to execute a new ritual, an inversion of the Pact Infernal. She wants to siphon the stolen divine power out of Asmodeus, rip it out of the Nine Hells, and essentially unmake him as a god.
She wants to hit the cosmic undo button. But how do you siphon power from a deity? You can't just cast a spell at the sky.
You have to use the original plumbing. The magic traveled from the mortal plane to the Nine Hells through the conduits of the Toril 13. To pull the magic backwards, she needs to use the living descendants of those 13 bloodlines as the reverse conduits.
Wait, I need to make sure you all understand the sheer horror of this. The descendants people like Faraday and Havilar are just normal people. If Briseis forces the entire divine payload of a god backward through their bodies, what happens to them?
The physical and metaphysical strain would completely incinerate them. The inversion ritual will unmake the pact, sure, but it will physically unmake the warlocks serving as the batteries. It is a guaranteed death sentence for every descendant involved.
That is the most tragic, brutal irony in this entire story. The Book of Tarchimus claimed Briseis sacrificed herself to save her people. But now we see her true colors. So what does this all mean? To undo the enslavement of her race, Briseis has to physically unmake, meaning kill her own descendants. She's willing to spill the blood of her great-grandchildren to fix a mistake she made 100 years ago. She hasn't learned a thing.
Her megalomania completely overrides any maternal or familial instinct. She systematically tracks down the necessary components. She locates Freniki, the undead lich from the original circle. She gathers other heirs, like Adascria Tyrianicus. And because Farida's pact is fiercely guarded by Lorcan, Briseis turns her attention to the twin.
Oh, no.
She violently possesses Havilar's body, hijacking her consciousness to orchestrate the ritual from the inside.
And she needs a container. If you pull the power of a god out of hell, you can't just let it loose on the material plane. It would act like a metaphysical nuke. Where does she plan to dump all this stolen divinity?
She seeks out the Staff of Vezuth, the relic of the god Asmodeus originally cannibalized. But more importantly, she targets a corpse. Deep beneath the dragonborn city of Jirad Timor lies the buried corpse of a dead, untheric moon god named Nana Sin, also known as Enlil.
She plans to use the descendants as hoses, the Staff of Vezuth as the nozzle, and pump Asmodeus' divine power into the dead body of Nanasin to resurrect him. It is a brilliant, terrifyingly functional plan.
And it forces Faraday into an agonizing climax. Faraday is standing at the epicenter of a conflict that involves armies of devils clashing with demons from the abyss, the chosen champions of various gods intervening, and the fundamental structure of the pantheon hanging in the balance. But for Faraday, the stakes are intensely personal. Her sister is trapped inside her own body, possessed by their deranged grandmother.
Put yourself in Farida's shoes. Just think about the impossible weight of this choice. Your entire existence, your magic, your very DNA is the result of a corrupt bargain. Do you help the architect of that bargain tear down the universe to fix it, knowing it will cost the lives of your family? Do you help tear down the god of evil? Or do you fight your grandmother to save your sister, effectively protecting the very tyrant who cursed your bloodline?
It is a profound moral paradox. Faraday must navigate this without losing her own soul, outsmarting both the devils who want to own her and the ancestor who wants to consume her.
The sources describe this breathtaking visual. Faraday holding the ruby rod of Asmodeus in one hand, the ancient staff of Azuth in the other, standing amidst the chaos of clashing immortal armies, forced to make a decision that will echo across the plains. It's a stunning culmination to a century of lies.
Which brings us to the synthesis of what we've explored today. The arc of the Toril 13 is a masterclass in the law of unintended consequences.
It starts with a shivering, desperate orphan in the snows of Vasa who simply decides she will never be powerless again. That raw, understandable human need for security spirals into a bid for cosmic authority. She coerces 12 others, strikes a deal with the devil, and shatters the biological reality of millions.
She creates a century-long economy of soul trading, where mortal descendants are hoarded like stock options in hell. And it all culminates in a ghostly rebellion that threatens to unmake the pantheon itself.
Right.
When you make a deal to solve an immediate crisis, the fine print is often paid by generations who haven't even been born yet. They are the ones who wake up with the horns and the targets on their backs.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to mull over. Something that isn't explicitly confirmed in the historical records, but considering who we are dealing with, it's impossible to ignore.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We've spent this whole deep dive looking at how Briseis Kakistos thought she could outsmart the god of evil and then tried to correct her mistake. We watched her spend a century meticulously plotting a hyper-complex ritual to tear him down.
Yeah.
But consider this, Asmodeus is the ultimate master of contracts and manipulation. He sees every angle, every loophole, every cascading butterfly effect across millennia. Is it really possible that a mortal ghost surprised him?
You're suggesting the rebellion was a feature, not a bug.
What if he wanted Briseis to rebel? What if her century-long plot to dethrone him wasn't a glitch in his system? What if her gathering of the heirs, her location of the Staff of Azuth, her attempt to funnel divine power into a dead god, what if all of that was just another clause in a contract she never truly understood? What if, even in her ultimate act of defiance, she was doing exactly what Asmodeus needed her to do all along?
When you play chess against the devil, even the moves you make to flip the board were likely calculated in his opening gambit.
Exactly. Keep that in mind the next time someone offers you a deal that sounds a little too good to be true. You might want to have a lawyer check the fine print for the metaphysical fate of your great-grandchildren. Thank you so much for bringing such an incredibly rich, dense stack of lore to the table today.
It was a pleasure to unpack. The history of Toril provides an endlessly fascinating lens through which to examine power, agency, and consequence.
It really does. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep your eyes open, read the fine print, and try to keep your soul strictly off the market. Catch you later.